Welcome to Bloomberg Law. I'm Pacchia. I'm joined now by Steve Olenick. He is an attorney at the law firm of Davis Gilbert, and he represents pro athletes in his practice. Steve, thanks so much for coming back to see us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm digging the sweater. I think you're our first guest ever on Bloomberg Law to be rocking a sweater under the vest, so kudos for that.
Glad it's here.
Right on. All right, so the burning question here, as always, updates on negotiations between players and management in the NBA. Are we going to have an NBA season next year? I'm getting increasingly nervous, but I'm going to defer to your judgment on this.
Well, I think, right now right now there's no talks right now scheduled. Mm-hmm. I think, the next 2 weeks is very critical. Obviously, the first 2 weeks of the season has been canceled, but look for the season to start hopefully in January.
Oh, so we might actually see some basketball this year.
I definitely think so.
Why has it been so difficult up to this point? This is a simplistic question, but I can't come up with an answer. NFL, it seemed to move along. It was slow, but not as slow as the NBA. What's the difficulty here?
Well, you come down to the money. So I think it's a staring contest right now. It's like who has leverage. Mm-hmm. The players are saying that they do because you're starting to see players go play overseas, but you're also starting to see the owners say, we want what we want, and if we don't get it, there'll be no season.
Mm-hmm. But the leverage dynamic looks quite different from the NFL. It seems as if the players here, obviously because they can go play overseas, some of them at least, and we'll get to that in a moment, they have a greater degree of leverage. How would the owners be able to counteract something like that?
Well, these are rich owners. So, these guys have money. And so at the end of the day, you have to look at from the standpoint of who can last the longest. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, you would tend to think, because these guys are very influential, very affluent, that the owners would actually have the leverage. But as you're starting to see players play overseas, if you start to see a couple of these marquee players go across the water, then you can argue that the players have the leverage.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. We're certainly seeing the Kobe Bryants of the world are able to go over. He hasn't signed yet, I don't believe, but word is that he might go play in Italy for some extraordinary amount of money. But what about the Brian Scalabrinis of the world? The role players, not necessarily the top-level talent. What are they going to do in the event that there isn't an NBA season? How are they going to deal with the reality?
Well, for a lot of those players that have actually signed agreements, they have an out clause so that they can actually come back in the event that the lockout is lifted. But in the event that the lockout stays for the whole season, they can play, overseas for the length of their contract. So I wouldn't really look at it in terms of, whether they can get out. A lot of players either have the out or they don't have the out. What's interesting is over in China, where the actual Chinese Basketball Association would not allow the players to leave in the event that there was a lockout.
Really?
Correct.
On a percentage basis, how many NBA players from last year are going to play overseas next year?
Well, it's tough to say because I think as the lockout goes even further, I think you'll start to see some of the teams overseas, some of the larger budget teams, try to create roster spots. So, it's whether it's 10%, 15% of the players that are willing to go play overseas. Obviously, in the NBA, you have 450 guys in the league right now. So,
I want to talk about a potentially not so happy scenario. What if someone gets hurt overseas? Can they come back and play? I've heard that this could be in effect that would come to bear on a person's contract back in the United States.
Yeah, their contract can be voided. So in the event that they're not covered with insurance, in which a lot of these players that go play over are, but in the event that they actually do get hurt playing overseas, their contract can be voided.
Complicated stuff. Steve, thanks so much for coming. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Glad to be here always.
That's Steve Olenick from the law firm Davis Gilbert. If you'd like to learn more about the cases or issues we just discussed, go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.